I have with me Patrick Dodd, the Global President and Chief Commercial Officer of Nielsen. Thank you so much for joining us on BloombergQuint.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with the most obvious question. India is witnessing a slowdown currently, but where does India stand in terms of consumption, when you compare it with global markets?
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been here this week, and the topic on everyone's mind is what's happening with the economics and the slowdown in the FMCG industry. But I have to say, as I sit through most of the meetings, I'm doing it with a smile on my face. So when people have talked about slowdown and the number is still in Q2 10%, it's a very healthy growth rate relative to what we're seeing in other markets around the world, and even emerging markets that are in the high single-digit range. 10 is still a very, very strong number for the FMCG industry. But we can't just sit back because it is slower than it was in previous quarters right now. And so I think that's what's on everyone's mind. But there are a few indications out there to show that the Indian consumer loves to shop, they love to consume, and consumption opportunities are still out there.
Okay, and how is it currently globally? If you could give us a flavor of how is consumption actually moving globally as well, because I believe economies are still not growing at the at very high pace that is expected. So where does India stand in comparison to global numbers?
Yeah, so if you look at overall global consumption for the FMCG industry right now, it's a tale of two worlds right now between developed and developing economies. That's not a surprise. But of late, actually, the developed markets are actually punching above their weight a little bit, where they were more flattish to slightly declining, even in the US a year ago. They are starting to post growth across the overall industry. Now, there are different winners and losers within there, but we are starting to see growth in developed markets, and then they're still continuing in developing markets, some markets up, some markets down a little bit versus previous quarters, but overall developing, still fueling most of the growth in the FMCG industry.
Okay, and where do we see the consumer index in India and also globally at this point in time?
Yeah, it's amazing for me. I always look at some of the markets around the world, and looking where India is, it's nice when you can say you're number one. And India is number one on terms of the most positive consumer confidence index. And when I look at this index, I really do see it as a future predictor of consumption. This is a consumption-based economy, particularly around the FMCG industry. And when we start looking at consumers and the questions they're asking themselves, we ask them about their future job prospects. Will their finances be better? And are they willing to spend in the next few quarters? Very high. So the number is 138, very high versus the rest of the world.
Oh. Okay.
And that's up versus the last quarter as well.
Okay. And also, how are consumers actually looking at brands in India? Is there stickiness with brands? Because there's also, some consumers are actually moving from unbranded to unbranded right now, especially towards the smaller packs. But is there stickiness within brands, or are they still experimenting with brands? If you could throw in some flavor, and also globally, if there is stickiness with brands even today.
Yeah. So one of the things we are seeing is there is more choice out there than ever before for all kinds of reasons. Digital being a big piece of that. But even just the amount of brands that are out on the marketplace, be it in beauty care, be it in pet care, be it in household foods, be it that people are trying new international products and different, the world is globalizing. So the choice that consumers have is huge. And that's what's making it tougher for marketers out there. Manufacturers are building brands, retailers are building brands. And what we're seeing right now, we've just completed a study worldwide taking a look at loyalty or disloyalty, depending on how you want to look at it. And again, India ranked number one, but on the disloyalty scale, meaning that only 2% of Indian consumers said they will stick only with their existing brands. A good majority of them said they are looking forward and they love trying new products. And then a few of the consumers also said they like to try new products, and they will, but they need to be swayed a little bit, which means there's a big battle out there for share of mind and share of stomach or share of wallet in terms of the Indian consumer right now. And India did rank number one. The global number there was 92. So that even shows globally there is a huge opportunity for marketers and companies to still steal some share or really build the trust in their brands and continue to innovate so they can really stay ahead.
But also, if you go to see, brand penetration in the country is relatively low compared to global markets. Do we see a possibility for more global brands coming to India right now? Because you're saying that there is scope. Consumers want to move to other brands. They want to try out other brands. Do we see more such global brands actually looking to enter India right now, despite the slowdown? I know it could be a temporary slowdown, but will we see more brands coming in and because this is a market that's growing and people are wanting to try out newer brands?
One of the interesting parts about Nielsen is we are a global company, and I get to meet a lot of global executives from some very large companies. Whenever I ask them where they're laying their bets for the future, India is usually in the number 1, 2, or 3 country in the world. So my anticipation is you will start to see even more brands. Now, the one thing we have to keep in mind here is while Indians, consumers, they love variety and choice, they love to shop, but they also like good value. And so, I think as we walk through what's going to happen, those companies that can really bring their products in here, make them available to consumers, and make sure they hit the right price points, really important. The other thing that we're recommending to a lot of companies right now is don't treat India like a country. You have to treat India almost like you would treat Europe, where you have different varieties, different options in different parts of the country. Pretty critical to win.
So are we going to see more flavors actually being built within the country itself by these global companies?
I hope so, don't you?
Because we've already seen some examples of, like Mondelez actually building some products only for the Indian market. So do we see more global companies doing that? A lot of them already are.
Yeah. So one of the trends that we started to see, and it's really interesting globally, is that smaller brands and local brands were winning share. It didn't matter what market you were in. It could be the US, it could be in Indonesia, it could be in Korea. Local was beating the large multinationals. Of late, we're starting to see some of the multinationals come back now, and I think they're changing their operating model to get a little bit more agile, a little closer to the local consumer, still trying to hold on to some scale, because this is really a scale or customization game. And companies are really trying new business models. Mondelez is a perfect example of that in terms of adjusting to this market. And we see that in other markets around the world. So I do think that battle for share at the local level is going to be very interesting to watch in the upcoming few quarters.
Okay. And currently with the global trade wars happening, how will this impact India's trade with US, and also globally, how do we see economies also changing because of this, or consumption being impacted because of these global trade wars?
Yeah. So far, everyone knows about what's happening with a few other large countries around the world. Yes. So far, we have seen no impact in the FMCG industry coming from that right now, because I think a lot of companies have built very strong local franchises. It's hard to predict what's going to come. But in order to have good local businesses, you have great local relations, you're giving jobs, you're building factories, you're getting close to the community. It's very hard for me to predict what's going to happen between the global trade wars, but we haven't seen it show up in the numbers yet. My only advice to companies is always local wins.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.